Okay, I want to go over how to do our appliance invoices today. So the first thing you want to do, just from your default screen here, is go to Service, Tasks, Service Accounting, and Invoice Listing. And now this is going to show all of the invoices right now between your dates up here. Normally we'll just leave this as the default, but once this goes into June, this will automatically default to June 1st, so you want to make sure that you change this back to an earlier date like May 1st, so that you'll catch all the invoices. Otherwise you'll be missing things from like May 31st, 30th, all that. So for now we're just going to leave this the same. We're going to change this to not approved because I only want to look at invoices that are not approved as we go through this. Our division will be Appliance, so we'll go down to Division 68 and select that. So now we're looking at all not approved invoices between the 1st and the 27th. We're going to start with the most basic one, and then we'll probably introduce some progressively more difficult ones. So let's start with this one here, this Marty and Rhonda Smith. To open the invoice, you just click this little arrow here. So I'll click that. Now the first thing we do when we open an invoice is we put it in a batch. You'll have two batches. One will be invoices that are already paid, like this one. It has a check number there. And then you'll have another batch that is stuff that we need to mail out. So the batch name, we're going to put the date. We'll just put today's date. And then normally for paid batches, you would put your initials. So I'm going to put DC, and then I'm going to put a 2 behind it. If you're going to mail out invoices, you'll just leave that as just your initials, or you can put your initials plus AR behind it for accounts receivable. It's really however you want to do it, just as long as you know which two batches you're working on. The name of the batch doesn't matter that much, but I do this just so it's easy to see which ones I need to put the invoice in. So you put the batch number in, push tab, and then that'll come up and ask you if you want to create that batch, which yes we do. Do you want to assign the invoice to the batch? And you say yes. So now the invoice is in the batch. First we go to the info page. Now here we just kind of start from the top and work our way down. So first the invoice date, that'll normally just be the same. We always zero out the cash date, so always change that to 0. Then we double check the division, that's correct. The tax code is Wichita, that's correct here. We can see the address here. And then we look for the payment method. So this was paid by check. All of our invoices will be changed to accounts receivable invoice. If it's a no charge, actually you can change it to no charge, but for the most part you're just going to be using this accounts receivable invoice. Once the check gets turned in by the technician, then it's applied to the customer's account. So we don't ever leave this as a check, because then it automatically applies itself to the customer's account, and we don't want to do that. Sherry applies all the checks after the techs have turned them in. Our invoice style here will always be service type summary. Now on the salesman 1 box, if the customer pays by check or cash, we always change this to mobile. And that is just saying that the technician collected the money mobilely out in the field, and Sherry can run a report that pulls any invoice that's not closed out or had a payment applied to it by using this mobile, and she can see if a technician hasn't turned a check in or hasn't turned in cash. So that's why we do that. Then we'll check to make sure the correct technician is chosen here. If two different techs go out, and maybe the first time it was Dana and second time it was Steven, and Steven actually did the work, we want to make sure it says that Steven did the work. So we would pick his name, or if it was Dana, it would show up right here and we would pick his name. Last, the PO box here. If we do any work for the Whirlpool or Lowe's, if they have a PO, I'll put that in there. Or if we do work for a company that requires a PO, that's where we'll put that PO number. Finally, we look at the services provided. That's almost all the time just going to say appliance repair, because that's the only work that they do in this division. So that'll say appliance repair there. So we'll save this. And then we move to the billing details tab. That's the next one here. So this is the most basic invoice, just the standard $75 charge. For some reason, there's always an extra line item that comes up when the technicians do these tickets. So I'll normally just delete one of the lines. So I've got that first one here. You can delete the second one if you want. Either way, it doesn't matter. I'll delete this first one. Delete, and yes, I want to delete it. And then I'll make sure that that $75 sales amount is in here. Then we just double check that it says taxable, because all labor and parts are taxable for our regular service calls. So I save that. We see our subtotal 75, sales tax 563, and the total is 8063. Okay, then we'll just move on to the work description. If there's anything weird in here, like misspelled words, I'll sometimes correct that. It's not absolutely necessary, but if we're mailing out an invoice to a customer, I normally like to make sure it doesn't look too bad. Any of these other tabs we don't use too much. I know the technicians under the call pictures will oftentimes put in the serial number or like a sticker on the machine, and you'll see that come up here if you need to look at it. The tech times will show how long they were out there. Should be pretty accurate. This one I'm not sure. It doesn't look too accurate. That's only a few minutes, but yeah, we don't really use the other tabs, so we'll just exit. Okay, and then the last thing we do is approve the invoice. That's down here. So you'll click approve. It'll tell you it's been approved. If there's any errors, like a part that's not existing on a technician's truck or something like that, that'll pop up. But this is the most basic invoice, and they're pretty easy to do, especially once you get used to it. So that's all for this invoice. And now once you have an accumulation of invoices in here, I'll go through and I'll double check them. I'll do any printing that needs to be done, and then I will post the invoices. So we'll exit this. Now you'll see that this invoice is still in our list. If you click refresh over here, or you can also use the key Alt and then R, then that will refresh the page. And then we'll see that that invoice is no longer on here. So we're going to go to the next one. Let's try this Randy Miller one. So we'll click these little arrows. Looks like it was paid with a check, so we're going to put that in our paid batch. And I called that DC2. You can also use this drop-down menu. It has all of the open batches if you ever aren't sure which batch you put it in. So I'll do that, and yes, I want to assign it here. Go to the info page. First, we zero out the cash date, make sure the division's right, tax code is good, change the payment method to accounts receivable invoice, make sure it's got a check reference in there. Invoice style is service type, and then we're going to pick the mobile technician since it was a cash or a check. No PO number needed. There was just Dana on this ticket, and the appliance repair is correct there, so we'll save. Go to the billing details. I'm going to delete that top line and put that 95 back in there. If you delete the bottom line, you'll already have that 95, but I don't know why I do it like that. Subtotal 95, sales tax is good, and the total was 102.13. So we go to the work description. I'm going to clean this up just a little bit. So it wouldn't be too big of a deal if we close that out and we weren't mailing anything out, but I like to make sure that's correct. So we'll exit, and then we just approve. You can also approve by hitting Alt-A. I use a lot of shortcut keys so we can make it quick. So now we've got both of those that we've worked on approved, and then I'll refresh this. You don't have to refresh it every time, but if you accidentally open one that you've already worked on, it might kind of mess you up. Next I'm going to work on this player piano one. It's probably an AR. It looks like we didn't collect a check. There would be a check reference here. They should change it to accounts receivable in the field, but they often do not do that. So I'm going to put this one, since it's not paid, I'm going to put, I'm just going to leave it as DC. Yes, I want to create the batch and I want to assign it to this batch. So I'll go to the info, accounts receivable invoice here. Oops, I should have done that cash date first, make sure the division's right, tax code is good, invoice style is service type summary. Don't need to do anything on the salesman because we didn't collect anything, and the appliance repair is correct. I'm going to get rid of that top line and make sure that 95 is back in there. So then we've got our total 102.13, and that's correct. Then we just clean this up a little bit. Okay. Alt S is also how you can save. And then Alt X will exit. So I'm going to exit there. Everything's good on this, so then we just approve. And now we've got that approved in our batch. I'm going to refresh this. And now I want to see if I can find one that's maybe a little more complicated. Let's try this Paul Chichester. Okay, so this one has a purchase order, so that would be good. Sometimes we do have to clean things up because they kind of put things in weird here. Usually when I see a PO on a ticket, the first thing I'll do is click the work order. And I'll make sure that the status is set to closed, because we want to make sure the PO is closed before we close the ticket, and it is there. So I'm going to exit. I'm going to put this in my paid batch, which is DC2 tab, and I'm going to assign it to that batch. We see our unapproved one over here and our two that we've worked on previously. I'll go to the info page. Okay, so it looks like there were two payments, two different checks here. 0 at that cash date. Derby's correct. Division 68. We've got both those checks in there. Salesman's going to be mobile, that's right. And then appliance repair. So now our total should be, looks like the 189.72 twice, but they've only got it as 189.72. So this is where it gets a little complicated. See, there's the call pictures there. They take a picture of that serial number. It gets a little complicated because I'm not sure how he put this in here, what the actual total is or what the total of the checks are. My guess, I'm going to try to take a guess here. Where's my calculator? I'm on a remote computer right now, so I can only see one of my screens at a time. If I take 189.72 and subtract out our normal service charge, yeah, I was trying to see if maybe he doubled it. So I'm not sure on this one. I would have to ask Dana or find out from Sherry what actual check she has for this. This is good though. I can show you how to put this back into the default batch. So if you run across a ticket that you can't do, you can put this back in the default batch, which will be the month, May, the year 19_WT. And I'll hit tab, and yes, I want to put it back in that batch. So this is the default batch. You see how many tickets are in there. You can also find it from the drop down here. It'll always be the 3-letter month and then the 2-digit ending year _WT. So I'm going to get out of that one because I can't do that right now. And let's try this Laura and Brian Hupak. Okay, this one looks good. So again, there's a PO here. We can see that's from Appliance Parts Depot. I'm going to click the work order and make sure this says closed. Then I'm going to put this in my paid batch. Go to the info page. Make sure the cash date is zeroed out. Now the city here is Bel Air, so I want the tax code to also say Bel Air. I believe they have the same tax rate right now, but we just make sure it's the same. Since this was collected by credit card, we're not going to have any payment reference here, but you can put CC if you want to. No need for the salesman. Make sure this says service type summary and appliance repair. Now we saw on the front, when they run a credit card, it automatically attaches to the invoice and it says deposit, and then it puts the credit card information, so that's how we know it's a credit card. Okay, now I'm going to go to the billing details. I'm going to go ahead and fix the labor one. So delete that 90 and put it back in here. Okay, the last thing to talk about is the PO line. So if you have this line highlighted, you'll see a PO number down here. That's 59068. We always have to make sure this cost offset account says 1405 inventory dropship. Sometimes if you change a service type, it will move this up to inventory, and we don't want it to do that. We want this to say inventory dropship. When we close the purchase order in the PO side, the purchase inventory module, we close it to 1405. And then when we put it on the invoice, we also want it to go to 1405 so that this unit cost will cancel out. So we have to make sure that on the PO line item that it says 1405 for this offset account, and that there is a unit cost in here. Sometimes you'll see if the PO was pulled into the ticket before it was closed, before the PO was closed, this will say 0, and we can't do that. We would have to delete this line item and then pull it back in. So I'll do that right now just to show you how that works. But I'm going to make note of my sales amount 4662. I'm going to delete this line, and then it will automatically pop up and ask me if I want to include it, and I'll say yes there. Make sure this says closed, and then when you save, that will pull it back onto the ticket, and we see our total here. Sometimes it won't include that total, so you have to try and remember that or write it down, but it did on here, so we'll save that. Go to the work description, fix that a little bit. Okay, and then we're ready to approve that invoice. Okay, so that's just the basic tickets. They're pretty easy to do, especially once you get used to it. If you can use the Alt keystrokes on the keyboard, that makes it go a lot faster. You don't have to do that. It doesn't matter. You can click around as much as you need. I'm going to do one more basic one just to show you here. I'm going to put this in a batch that I've already been working on. So put it in the batch, take out the cash date, make sure the tax code's correct, division's correct. It is accounts receivable, it's a credit card. No need for salesman, invoice style's good, and the service type is good. I'm going to delete that line, put in my 75, and save. And then check out the work description. We're not going to mail this out, so I'll leave that one. And then we approve it. And then once you've got your approved invoices showing up here, I'll go through and I'll double check them, and I will go through and print, or fake print. We print to PDF just so the system thinks that it's been printed, and then I will post them for you. Okay, so that's all the basic ones. I might see if I can find a warranty company or Whirlpool or Lowe's or something like that, just so I can show you how that works. I know probably these older ones will have something like that. But I am not having any luck. So there's plenty of invoices right now that are pretty simple to do that we can work on. Okay, here's a Lowe's one. So the first thing I do when I see one that's going to Lowe's is I open that work order. I double check down here to see if there's an approval for the amount. I don't see that here, so I'm going to go ahead and take this code and copy it. And then normally I will put this into the PO line. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but I do that just so we can have it tied to the invoice. I'm going to go ahead and change this to accounts receivable invoice. Take out the cash date. And everything else looks good here. Yeah. So I go to the billing details. I'm just, for now, going to assume that the pricing is correct on here. If it's not, we can always change it later. As long as the invoice isn't posted, we can go in and change all this. Here's a PO line. So we'll make sure that PO line is going to 1405, which it is, and it has a unit cost in there. So I'm going to leave all this the same. I did change this to non-taxable. So that's what these boxes are here. And that's for the Lowe's and the Whirlpool calls. Work description, I'm not going to worry too much about that. Now for all of the Lowe's and Whirlpool calls, I've been putting them in a special batch, this April 30th, 19 action. And that's just until we get approval for them, everything's good, then I'll move them to my normal batch so I can post them out. But I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then I will print this out. It's actually going to print at the office, but I'm at home now, so I'll print that out and I'll give that to Kim, and she'll go through and make sure everything is correct on there. So that's really all it is for the appliance invoices. They're pretty simple. If you run across anything that looks weird or you need help with anything, just ask me. I can help you out with it. There's probably some stuff that I didn't go over. Basically, the things you want to remember are just make sure you get the ticket into a batch. Well, that should be the first thing that you do here. I'll do one more. Yep. So make sure it goes into your batch. On that info page, make sure you zero out that cash date. Make sure this tax code matches, so that's May's. Division's correct here. Make sure this says accounts receivable invoice. This is a credit card. You can put CC if you want, it doesn't matter. Service type summary for the invoice style. No need for the salesman unless it's a cash or a check. And then the appliance repair service type is correct down here. Go to the billing details. I'm going to delete that line, just so we have one line item on there. Make sure that total is still correct, 161.25. I'm not going to worry about the notes on this one, but then I'll approve that. Once it's approved, I will go through and double check all of them, and then I will print and post them. And again, you can refresh here or click Alt-R and that will refresh your list up. So that's all for these. If you have any questions, just let me know.